It's actually a nice combination of people who are still entering the industry from an experimentation perspective, but also you've got long-term practitioners in there as well. And when the two come together, you have this absolute mashup of ideas, and you hear from a variety of different people. What connects all of them is that they're all very passionate about experimentation. It's nice to be in a room with so many people who love what they do for a living.
Welcome to nohacks.show, a weekly podcast in which smart people talk to you about better online experiences. This is another episode we're doing with Experimentation Elite. Experimentation Elite is the UK's premier experimentation and CRO experience, taking place on June 11th and June 12th in Birmingham. So head over to experimentationelite.com and get your ticket now. Today, I'm excited to finally talk to Bhavik Patel. Bhav is Director of Experimentation and Analytics at LeanConvert, founder and organizer of Crap Talks. Bhav, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tony. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to talk to you. So let's talk about Experimentation Elite. That's like the big thing happening a few weeks from now. You've been to the Experimentation Elite before. You've been to all of them, right?
I've been to three. So
Three.
I don't have a perfect track record, but I've been to three of them.
Close enough. So why is Experimentation Elite different than other events?
I think it's nice when you have got a room full of... It's actually a nice combination of people who are still entering the industry from an experimentation perspective, but also you've got long-term practitioners in there as well. And when the two come together, you kind of have this absolute mashup of ideas, and you hear from a variety of different people, and you get to meet a wide, diverse group of very, very clever people, and actually what connects all of them is that they're all very passionate about experimentation, which is nice, because not everyone shares that passion for experimentation. So it's nice to be in a room with so many people who love what they do for a living.
Right, and there are two hotspots for experimentation in Europe. It's the UK, it's the Netherlands. I talked to many people from the Netherlands and heard their perspective on why the Netherlands is so good at it and so advanced. What do you think makes UK special?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I think we've had to become special in some ways, right? If you think about kind of like tech capitals, obviously in the US, you have San Francisco. I'm not saying London is a tech capital of Europe, but we have so many tech companies in London. We have so much tech coming out of London that we don't have a choice but to adopt and embrace experimentation. And I think from a product development perspective, experimentation is that kind of like natural evolution to you build your product, you get adoption, see how it goes, and then you start to experiment on it. So I think one of the reasons why London is probably such a hotspot for experimentation is just the fact that it's such a epicenter of tech in London, in Europe, sorry.
It is, and it made sense then. Like if you have all this tech and all this data, sleeping in all this data would be just blasphemy. Like do something with it. So yeah, that's awesome. And there's so many great experts and great experimentation people from the UK. It's crazy. It feels like at one point, like half of my network on LinkedIn was UK people. And I wasn't trying to connect with people from the UK. It just happened organically. So let's just say it again. Experimentationelite.com, get your ticket, see the schedule. Hey, you'll meet both of us there if you go. So that's kind of a bonus. Let's talk about your workshop. So your workshop is an experimenter's guide to the galaxy. It was universe before, and then you decided to change it to galaxy. Can you explain that?
It was always galaxy.
Okay.
And then someone quoted it as universe. Aaron quoted it as universe. And for some reason, I didn't even think twice about it. I was like, yeah, that's my workshop. And then I was like, hang on, that's not my workshop. My workshop is Experimenter's Guide to the Galaxy. After, the Travelers.
Yeah,
the book.
Yep.
So yeah, it was named after that, and I was just like, I got confused myself.
That's cool. That's a cool story. I'm sure. Is she trying to sabotage your workshop there because they're at the same time?
I don't know. I mean, I'd be a Jedi's like ideal, like, and they wouldn't even need to use Jedi mind tricks. They could just like divert me with misinformation. I'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Awesome. So, an experimenter's guide to the galaxy. What is the galaxy in experimentation? That's the first
that-
question.
That's a great question. So the reason why I called it an experimenter's guide to the galaxy is because I think when we think about experimentation, there are a wide areas. There's a wide area of disciplines within experimentation that kind of makes up experimentation as a whole. Now, I'm not going to cover things like design and engineering because I'm not a designer, nor am I an engineer. But if you think about experimentation from outside of that, you have the ideation, you have planning, prioritization, monitoring, launching, post-experiment analysis. And I think in that sense, it becomes its own sort of like micro universe. And I think as an experimenter or CRO, however you decide to label yourself, having a firm grasp on the design of an experiment is important. So I guess when I say the universe or the galaxy in this case, what I really mean, I'm telling you, Erin's killed me.
You're toast.
She's literally absolutely destroyed my metaphor. I joke, Erin. I love you, really. So when I talk about the galaxy, I mean that from a pure design perspective. Like, what does the design of an experiment look like, and how do you then analyze it and assess how it's done?
Okay, so when you say galaxy, that means that there's a lot of stuff that an experimenter needs to be aware of, needs to be able to do. Now, let's compare experimentation in CRO like 15, 20 years ago, when it was in its earliest stages, and now, and the perfect profile for a person entering. So I started doing websites and kind of optimization like 10 years ago. So you had to know everything, like to get into CRO. And looking at all of these like veterans of CRO, and don't get me wrong, but you're one of them, I'm one of them, there's a lot of others. They kind of know all kinds of things. Did that change, like in 2024, entering CRO and experimentation? Is it more about specialists, or is it still a generalist thing?
I think if we compare it to sort of like 10, 15 years ago, I mean, even as a discipline, it wasn't labeled CRO or experimentation. It was things that people like you did, people like I did. Like when I was doing experimentation, my role was analytics and experimentation. No, sorry, it wasn't even analytics. It was growth. Sorry, this is before I entered into the world of analytics. I was doing growth for the clients I was working on, and I was doing. And then when I finally moved into an in-house role, my role was still acquisition specialist, and I was still working on growth for our company. So the evolution to this point in time where we're talking about experimentation CRO as a finite discipline, like that's the biggest transition that's happened over the 10 years. And then in terms of like what it takes, I think it's a more conscientious decision to do CRO now, whereas back then it was you did it as part of everything else.
You fell into it almost, yes. Exactly.
Yeah, but now you kind of you see people doing it, and you kind of say, "Hey, I want to do that. What do I need to do?" And I think then you kind of start to explore what the skill sets are. And from this point, I still believe in some ways it's a generalist role. I think you need to be able to do analytics. You need to be able to do like query data and look for insights. You need to be able to generate hypotheses. You need to be able to build reports. You need to be able to do ideation, prioritization. You need to think like a product person. So I think that it's, it being a specialist is maybe too limiting. But that being said, it's not an individual role. I don't want to say that by being a generalist, you're a one-man band or one-person band. You are part of a team, and there will be people who are more specialists, like data analysts, who you will rely on. But if I'm a CRO, I would consider analytics, experiment design, post-experiment analysis all part of my role.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, and I think, I don't know, to me, one of the biggest aha moments, and I started as a web developer, and then, when you build a website, you obviously look for things that are wrong and like try to fix it. I remember when I read the completely self-taught, completely in isolation, this was back in Serbia. I didn't know anyone, like I didn't have a network or anything. This was 2008. When I read Don't Make Me Think, and I was surrounded by developers who just build it, ship it, I'm done. When I read that book, I was like, oh my God, there's other people who look at the websites the way I do. Like, and that just opened it up completely for me. Now it's different. Now like CRO is a thing. CRO is not just abbreviation for Croatia. It's like its own thing. It wasn't like that. Like, by the way, did you see the Google Trends data for CRO?
No, I haven't.
Every
I've not
4
checked it.
years, there's a crazy spike because Croatia somehow does really well at World Cups.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
It's
I was going to say,
insane.
I bet that's a football trend.
Exactly. But anyway, back to your workshop. So, can you walk me through it, like the outline and some of the things you're going to cover? Not everything, of course. It's a 3-hour workshop after all.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a bit of a work in progress, actually. So the thing about me is that I don't have like off the shelf stuff. I do. I live by these really dumb rules in life, and one of them is when I build a talk or a workshop or something like that, I build it once. I might deliver it up to 3 times, and then I retire it and I work on brand new material. So this keeps me fresh. It keeps me thinking.
That's stand-up comedy. That's like what stand-up comedy is all about. So it's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you guys all find it funny but when we do the workshop. But effectively, the workshop will cover everything from hypothesis generation and writing good hypotheses, because I think this is fundamentally flawed in the industry. I've seen case studies on LinkedIn where people have posted the hypothesis, and you just look at it and think, that is not a hypothesis. That is just garbage. So hypothesis generation. Experimentation planning, so the design of the experiment, how long should it run for? How do you determine how long it should run for? Doing estimations in terms of effect sizes and all of those things that aren't intuitively thought about. To post-experiment analysis, like how do you utilize the data available to be able to make a conclusion about the experiment? What do you think about? And how do you cut segments and things like that? And then I'm also going to touch on some theory and like why it's important to only have like one or two metrics. Going into details around things like family-wise error rates and things like that. So I think it won't be like an overly academic experience. If anything, I try to make sure that it's to the point, pragmatic. I might even throw in some, hey, look, how do you use SQL in Google Sheets to do an analysis of your data really quickly? Because I think there's skills I think a CRO person should have, and I think this will be, and it's a few hours, so we'll definitely have enough time to cover everything. So I think it's going to be this kind of like end-to-end ideation, hypothesis, planning, launch, monitoring, analysis.
Got it.
And that will be kind of the galaxy that I'll try and cover off.
And just a reminder for the audience, you have to sign up for the workshop separately. If you get Experimentation Elite, like regular ticket, you need to sign up for the workshop as well.
That's right,
Don't forget to do that. So who's the ideal person who should go to do workshop? Like, is it someone who has no touch points with CRO, or someone who's dabbled with it, or what do you think?
I would say the ideal candidate is the non-technical CRO and non-technical product manager.
Okay.
And even non-technical marketing manager or marketing person. I don't want to throw manager in there. So I think that kind of like non-technical person, where if you've relied on an analyst in the past to help you design the experiment, if you've never really been formally trained on kind of like the basics of statistics, if you've never really understood the theory of a good hypothesis, if you've never really taken the time to analyze the data outside of what your A/B testing platform tells you, this is for you. Because I think, and actually, just because I touched on it, I think there is a huge reliance on people to take whatever the A/B testing platform you're using says as gospel, and it's fine. If you've set it up properly, it's okay. Like, I'm sure they've hired enough statisticians in their company to be able to say that actually the analysis, significance, whatever you want to do, whatever method you're using, is correct. But I think that also limits you in your understanding of how an experiment works and kind of like what goes into the mechanisms of a statistical study. So I think, like I said, it won't be a PhD in stats. It will be a kind of like a light touch, everything you need to know about experimentation from a statistical standpoint.
I love that. I really do. I cannot wait to be there in the room and hear you talk about it. One thing that CRO and experimentation is, like, you're not going to know everything. Like, even you said, like, you're not trying to teach them everything. But I think the most important skill to have in CRO is to be aware of everything that needs to be done and everything there is. Like, if you just go in blindly and you don't think that you need to check your test results, like, and trust them blindly, or you don't need to check if the implementation was done correctly or if the analytics is correct, you are more likely to fail than not. Like, that's just my thoughts on it. But to go back to T-shaped, like you need to have some skills, maybe not T, maybe you can have a few, but you need to be aware of every single thing if you want to be good at it. And yeah, this workshop is a good way to get there. So give me one more thing you're going to talk about, and then we move on to the next topic.
What am I going to talk about? I mean, I covered the end-to-end what the end-to-end workshop is going to be. Maybe I'll go a bit into kind of hypothesis generation and why I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about this. So having joined a CRO agency for the first time, I've not actually worked agency side before, so obviously I work for LeanConvert, they're a CRO agency. I get a chance to see hundreds and hundreds of experiments my team have done. Now, working in an in-house role is great because you get to go really in depth into one product and one company, one experience and one group of customers. But actually working for an agency, I've lost track of the amount of experiment reports I've read, and most of them are fine, but actually you start to see how people write hypotheses, and a good hypothesis can really no one really knows the outcome of an experiment, right? Like that's the whole point of experimenting. But you give yourself a fighting chance of running a valid experiment when you've built a hypothesis on sound reasoning. You've understand the mechanisms of that hypothesis, of what you're about to change, why you're going to change it. And when you frame it like that in a very specific way, you're in this position to really understand why you're testing something. So I think it's really easy to fall down the throw shit against the wall and see what sticks route. And that, for me, that's not experimentation. Yes, of course, you can use experimentation methods to see what sticks, but that's not really how you should be doing it. So I don't know. I think this is, I'm really passionate about this, and maybe I'm not doing a good enough job selling it, but it's so foundational. And I think people often forget this foundation side of things. And CRO for me is art and science. Product management is art and science. Marketing is art and science. But we have so many people who are focused on the art, that so many of them have forgotten about the science. And it's only when the two come together, you're really doing proper experimentation or proper product development, proper marketing, whatever you want to call it, whatever field you're in.
Art and science, I love that. So you mentioned, you saw some LinkedIn posts about bad hypotheses. And everyone has, like, it's not just something that you saw once. Give me one example, like without calling anyone out, one example of a bad hypothesis, like or what a template for a bad hypothesis would be.
Okay, I'll give you an example of one I've seen. I won't tell you where I've seen it, but I saw someone put, the hypothesis was, by making the checkout button sticky, making the checkout button sticky will encourage more people to add to basket, or something like that. Yeah. And I was like, okay, clearly someone has thought this is a good hypothesis, right? But now let's think about it pragmatically. If you were in a supermarket and someone followed you around with a credit card machine, is that going to really make you buy?
Well, I mean, it depends how threatening they are, but no. Absolutely
right?
not.
I mean, exactly. And so when I saw this I laughed. I genuinely laughed out loud that someone, I understood why, right? The logic when you don't think about it, beyond surface level, it makes sense. Hey, let's make the add to basket sticky.
Right.
But the idea that making it sticky will make more people purchase is insane. It was such a bad hypothesis that I couldn't believe that someone hadn't thought about it. And it was only when I said to that person, hey, look, if I followed you around a supermarket or a clothes shop with the credit card machine, are you going to buy it? No, you're going to probably leave the store.
Yeah.
So that's my bad example.
That's a go. Would you be able to save that hypothesis and make it good, or do we need to scratch that completely?
I would reframe it to understand why making it sticky is.
Okay.
I'm not saying that it was wrong, but just the way it was written is akin to someone following you around the supermarket.
It is. It really, really is, and that's not good. Okay. Shout out to Shiva, because we're gonna reference the LinkedIn post here, and that's what Shiva does so well, or used to do it from A to B. You had a post that 5 days ago, that started with building a network used to sound really wanky to me. Great hook, really, really good hook. But let's talk about what you meant in that post. And you referenced some layoff data and how having a network makes you feel safe. But I'll let you say that in your own words.
Yeah, I think when I first entered in industry, the whole concept of networking was something that salespeople did. It was something that people who were trying to generate leads did, or recruiters did, right? Like, hey, let's build a network so we can generate leads. And so for me, I'd always tied network to some outcome that you want, right? And it wasn't when I actually started doing it. And initially, it was like unconsciously doing it because I started doing it through crap talks. I spoke at my first event. People reached out. They contacted me. They added me on LinkedIn. I had virtual coffees with them. I had real coffees with them back when real coffees were a thing. And so that was kind of like the premise of it. But then I started, obviously, the post was triggered by the fact that, we're now deep into 2024 and we're still seeing tons and tons of layoffs happening. Okay, peak layoffs was like November 2022, sorry. That's when I was laid off. My company laid off nearly 700 people, which was insane. I was part of that layoff. But I got really lucky. I immediately had like 3 people reach out to me saying, hey, Bhav, we've got some vacancies. We have a job. There was a founder reached out to me, even LeanConvert. So where I'm working now, Tim Axton, who's the MD, he reached out to me saying, hey, Bhav, do you want to come and join us? Initially, I said no because I wanted to try my thing. And eventually I said yes, and I turned after a few months of doing so, like my own thing.
Right.
But I realized that a lot of people don't invest that time in building that network. And I don't. And when I say building a network, I don't mean go out and add 1,000 people on LinkedIn, right? I mean communicate with people, on a very human level. Talk to them, reach out to them, comment on what they're saying, read what they're saying, create your own point of view, right? Share your own point of view, start a discussion, go to events, speak at an event. I started Crap Talks, and that was sort of like my that was my entry into this world when I started in a meetup community just because I was fed up of all of the conferences I was going to. But through that, I was able to meet and learn so much from so many different people, and that just kept growing and growing, and very organically, I started doing more and more of it. But then it became, at some point, like the light switch went on, and it became a very conscious decision to network. So when people reached out to me, I immediately said yes. I don't care how busy I was. I found myself 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever, to talk to them. When someone asked for help, I immediately said yes. If someone asked me to speak at an event, I said yes. Someone asked me to speak on a podcast, I said yes. And by doing this and sharing my opinion and sharing and voicing my thoughts, I was able to build a network that was built on, I believe, authenticity. Like, I think there's obviously inauthentic ways to build networks, which is just, hey, let's connect on LinkedIn and never speak again. But then there is that world where you are voicing your opinion. And I think this is built on the foundations of doing critical thinking. I spend a lot of my time thinking. I'm not a very good communicator. I believe it or not, like I don't like public speaking. I don't like it's fun. I enjoy it, but I'm not very confident. So
I'm not buying that. I'm not buying any of that.
No, I promise it's true. But I make up. But what I lack in communication skills, I make up for in writing and thinking.
Okay.
So that when the time comes for me to communicate, I've already done a lot of the critical thinking I need to be able to voice an opinion.
Got it.
Like I can't shoot from the hip. If I'm in a meeting and someone asks me a question, my first response will be, hey, look, I'm going to take this away and think about it.
Got it.
I won't give you an answer there and then. And some people can. So for me, this is why that kind of like critical thinking, just thinking about your role, about what people have written, is so important. But then share that with the world. Play that back, voice what you think. So this is why I think networking is so important. And in this kind of like current turbulent time that we're in, where nobody's job is safe, it's important to have that network, because if you do find yourself on the receiving end of a P45 or P60, where you've been laid off effectively, that networking will come invaluable. I'm not saying it will definitely guarantee you a job, but from a pure probability perspective, it gives you an additional 3, 4, 5, 10% chance of landing your next gig.
Oh, definitely. So basically, you're on their radar. They have you in their minds. Like they know you exist constantly. So, ironically, you're like that sticky checkout bar at the bottom of the page. Go back to the thing you said earlier, but in a good way. One last question. Because I know a lot of people who are on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is just a network. Like, it could be anything. It could be live events. It could be whatever. They are on LinkedIn. They kind of have a profile. It's just their CV, their bio, whatever. But they don't know where to start. Like, it's really And I've talked to so many people who struggle with this. Once you start, it's easy. Like I was that person like 5 years ago. I don't know whenever it was. What should the first step be? Like I have my own theory and I have my own advice for them, but I want to hear from you.
Oh, that's a good question now. What should the first step be? I think the first step. I'll tell you what. Maybe not. Can I reframe the question?
Yeah, of
Instead
course.
of what should the first step be, when should your first step be?
Okay.
Can I answer that? And then
Of
I'll have
course.
to think about
Absolutely, yes.
when your first step should be now, not when you've been laid off.
Yeah.
One of the things I saw is a few people, like there's this guy I used to work with who has never been active on LinkedIn. A few weeks ago, sadly, he was laid off. But since then, he's been active on LinkedIn, like like, hey, I'm looking for a role. But then he's also been publishing content, and it's great that he's actually started. But imagine how much more powerful and how much more reach his content would have been, and how much reach it would have had if he had started, like voicing his thoughts. And he's a smart guy, if he had started voicing his thoughts 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So I would say rather than, not what should it be, when should your first action be? It should be now. What? I think this is completely up to you. Like find a medium that you're comfortable with. If you're not comfortable speaking publicly, start writing, right? What should you write about? I don't know. Next time you have an interesting conversation with someone, make some notes. I have so many sticky notes and digital notes of thoughts that have happened when I've been talking to people, and I turn them into proper thoughts afterwards. If you can't do that, reach out and have a conversation with someone saying, hey, look, I'd just like to have a chat with you. Reach out to yourself, right? Reach out to someone who you've been following, saying, hey, do you mind if we just have like 30 minutes? And most good, decent people will say yes. So if you don't know where you should start by reaching out to someone. When? Start now.
Great advice. I mean, it's like plant a tree, like 20 years in the past or today. Like those are the two best times. Well, there's 10 years in the past as well, but let's not get into the semantics. So my advice really always for people who literally are just getting started, like find 10 people who are like mean something to you in the industry you're in. Every post they have, every comment they have, at least read it. And then you'll get some thoughts. You'll start responding, you'll start communicating, and like 10 becomes 100, 100 becomes 1,000. Like it really snowballs after that. But make it small. Like have an easy start. Like if you're just gonna say, I wanna like be connected to 10,000 people, and like no, from 0 to 10,000, like you don't even know what the road is. No one does.
Exactly. I mean, we work in CRO. We know the meaning of vanity metrics, right? So having 10,000 people you're connected with that you never speak to, that's a vanity metric, if ever I heard one. I would much rather, a community of like 3,000-4,000 people. Okay, obviously I'm not going to speak to all of them, but I'm reading their stuff, I'm following what they're writing, and I'm maybe commenting on it. And they're the people I want to speak to.
100%. So one last call to action, experimentationelite.com. Go and get your ticket for the event and then sign up for Bhav's workshop. There's 2 other workshops. Let's just say what they are. It's Craig Sullivan and it's Erin Weigel. Happening at the same time, so you have to choose. But I think Bhav has sold his workshop, and I think some people might consider signing up for that. Bhav, it was such a pleasure to finally have you on this podcast and talk to you. And I will see you in like 4 or 5 weeks. And to everyone listening to this episode, please consider rating, sharing, and reviewing it. And I will talk to you next week.